Hi, I'm Cody Alexander with another episode of MatchQuarters Quick Hits. Today we're going to be discussing how to name formations, creating a science. This is one of the biggest things that I get asked about. Hey, how do you go about naming formations? Do you use what your offense is using? Do you use something else, a numbering system, something like that? So what we're going to do is really discuss and break down essentially what to name the formation, starting with the backfield and kind of how it relates to the formation. So here we have our five offensive linemen. That's pretty similar to everything that you're going to get. I mean, maybe in a bounce set, but here we're talking today just about basic formations. So if we just start with a basic spread 2x2, so you've got to the strong side, to the weak side. So how I normally do this is the Z is always the receiver to the strong side. So in this case, the field is going to be pointing that way. So the Z and the S. S stands for strong slot. W stands for weak slot. And then obviously you have the X receiver. Why do you use letters? Well, I use letters because it helps me identify who's actually getting the ball. Some people use numbers and they number 1, 2, 3, 4 as you go across the formation. But what this does is when I get a tight end, I can label it as a Y. Or if I get a fullback, I can label it as an F or a B. If I get an H back, I can label it as an H. And so what it does is it allows you to quickly assess who's in motion, who's getting the ball, and get your eyes right quickly. So here we have a 2x2. That's very simple. So in a regular shotgun formation, you have a quarterback and then you have a running back. Well, if the running back is to the strength, he's to the strength on both sides. So the three receiver side is pretty important. So this will be the strength. That's why it's ZS and then the A back for the A back. So all that is going to be is gun near. So usually how I'll label that is I'll just put a G and an N. And then how do I label this formation? I just call it doubles. So usually how I put it in huddle is GN space and then I'll put doubles. Now, what about the different variations of doubles? Well, what if S is on the ball and Z is off? Well, you can call that flip. You can call that anything you want to, but you kind of have to name it something else, especially if one is on and the other is off. Now, if this is their basic formation, what that allows you to do is to tell you when the back is away from their strong side. Some spread teams, this is kind of an old school deal where they put the Y or the big Y or the little Y on the ball at all times. It's kind of an old school way of doing it. A lot of teams now, it's just basically your double set. But if, for instance, let's say S is on the ball and Z is off, I call that Twix. So this would be called like a twin if it was just all by itself. This would be called a Twix. So this would be gun near Twix, and I put an X for Twix, and then it would be twin. So a TX and a twin. It kind of gives you that. Now if I get two of them, then it would be, let's say they're both on the ball. I'd call that double Twix. Okay, and that's how I would put that in. Huddle. So this allows you kind of to tell. Now, if a team runs always with the S on the ball to the field, or the guy always on the left is on, you could just call it doubles and move on. Whatever makes it as simple as possible to you. This would identify. A lot of teams, for whatever reason, as I've kind of gone through when I'm breaking it down, this formation in particular, you're getting a lot of stop corner. So I want my kids to know, hey, if number 2 is on the ball and we get a Twix set that gives them the same language that I'm talking, hey, we need to be alert for a stop corner or a smash concept. So that's pretty easy. If the back is into the boundary, so now I've got the back into the boundary. All I would label that is G and B. So that tells me I've got 3 into the boundary, and then I would just label it as doubles. So that would just be G and B, gun near boundary, and into doubles, because this is an even set. Pistol. That's always a good question that I get. What am I labeling it when I get pistol? Well, the field is always going to be the strength. That's kind of in the spread. They're trying to find the space. So you always label it as the strength. So that's kind of how I do that. in terms of setting the strength. I always get that question asked when it is pistol. If the quarterback is under center, I would just put a D for dot. So the old school dot quarterback, dot doubles is what I would get right there. Or P for pistol is what I would write if it was pistol. So that kind of goes through the basic 2x2 formations. Now let's transition to trips. So as we're going through 10 personnel, let's transition to trips. So again, our offensive line. So this would be normal trips. How do I write the letters? Well, Z is always to the strength. S and W are off the ball. X is always the single receiver. That's kind of how I normally do it, and then Q. Now, how do I set the back? Well, if it's gun near, it's still GN. It's near to the strength. The strength is the trips. If it's away, it's GF, gun far. It means he's to the single receiver, and I'll just put trips. Now, I do put open. And the reason why I put open is because I don't want it to assume that it's trips. If trips is there, that means I've got a Y, and I don't want a Y in 10 personnel. So I always make sure to put trips open. You have to have some sort of mark that tells you what the personnel grouping is for each one. So if I get trips, I have to put open, especially if I have an X receiver. So here, this would be gun near trips, open, and that's how I would label it. So what do I do about, in the 2x2, I've had people flip, right? I've had the S on the ball. Well, what happens if S is on the ball here? Z is here. You can keep with the T. Trips, triangle, because they kind of make a triangle, and then if W is on the ball, you can call that twist. So it's kind of, you got trips, triangle, twist, and it kind of allows you to establish what's going on. Sometimes guys will do, especially air raid guys, will run the dig shallow with W on the ball. That kind of allows you to do things. For whatever reason, people like to put S on the ball and run their smash stuff out of it like this. So again, I like to know who's on the ball. When you put somebody on the ball, you're changing the basic formation and letting you know. Now, some people, they just keep trips as trips. And that's simple, and that helps you break it down pretty easily. Okay, now let's transition to 11 personnel. So tight end kind of changes the game for the way that everybody sets a strength, how they're going to react with the secondary, and things like that. So let's go ahead. If the field is still going this way, let's go ahead and put our Y right here. Again, the Z is always a receiver to the strong side, so I'm going to make him the strong slot. We've got X, who's always away from Y. He's always away from the strength. And then I'm going to go ahead and put S. Now, the backfield is the same. Y is going to always be the strength. So if the quarterback's in the gun and the back is set here, that's going to be gun near. If the back is set away, that's going to be gun far. Pistol is pistol, and dot is still dot. But what I'm going to call this, some people will call it pro twin. Pro tells people that there's a tight end. You could drop that completely and just go gun near twin, gun near twin. Well, if I label it the personnel grouping before I label the formation, I still should be able to tell, okay, gun near twin. Some people, like I said, like to do pro twin. Hey, I like going ahead and putting pro twin just so I know that it is 11 personnel. That's totally fine too. It's really just kind of that's 3 more keystrokes. But you can label it as gun near twin or just gun near pro twin. So let's go with tight end to the strong side. So tight end now comes over here. Let's say we get a 3x1 look out of it. Again, Z is always to the strength. S is over here. Y is on the ball, and X is always away from Y. So what would this be? This would be gun far tray. Why do I not put tray open? Because there's only one tray. It's tight end trip. So I call that tray. Some people can call it whatever you want, but as long as you have something that you know, hey, this is tray, that's right there. So this would be gun far tray when I put that into huddle. The other sets that you get are the trips, and we had talked about this at 10 personnel. If I get a tight end and I get now how do I label the receivers? Well, X is always the outside receiver away from Y. Then I would have Z because he's the next strong receiver, and then I would have S. So that's kind of how I label that and kind of the thought process in between it. all this would be gun near trips. If the back was set over here, it would just be gun far trips. And so that's pretty simple, and that really gets you your 11 personnel for your basic 11 personnel formations. Finally, we're going to talk about 20 personnel. The basic one is twin open, and that's kind of what most of the teams are going to do. If the S does get on the ball, you could put Twix open and put TX, but for the most part, it's just going to be twin open. So you get twin open when you put it in the huddle. Now, if they're kind of an I team, then you put I. If it's I near, I far, some people put king, some people put queen. The strength is always going to be the two receiver side. And so if they put dot, you only put dot if it's a single back. So I is I, near is near, far is far, all of that. However you want to label those kind of traditional under center formations. Pistol is pretty simple too. Pistol, you have a B back and he's either to the strength or he's to the weak. And really how I do it is it's pistol near or it's pistol far. So if he's to the X receiver side, it's pistol far. If he's to the two receiver side, it's pistol near, and then again twin open. Where teams get really fancy with it is in the two back, because you can do so many different things. The basic one is really just the gun split. I always put the B back in gun split, and I always put him to the strength because he's a strong back, and then A is always away to the back. Now this is just gun split, so because it's gun, there's always going to be a G in it. Gun split is S, okay? Gun split. So that kind of makes it easy, and then you just label twin open. Now, this is what we see a lot of times is when they put an H in the backfield, and some people call it slant, some people slant opposite, stack opposite, those kind of things. Well, how do I eliminate keystrokes, and how do I make it as easy as possible? Well, again, we start with the G. What's our backfield? Our basic rules is what? Here's the strength, the two receiver side. He's away, so it's going to be gun far, and they're split. They're split from each other. So I'm going to go ahead and put a P because there's a P in split. Now, we're not talking slot. He's definitely in the box, and we'll talk about slot here in just a second. But this is definitely the strength call because it's the two receiver side, and he's within the box. So this is gun far split. So what happens if he lines up to the strength? Now they're stacked. So this would be gun near stack because stack has a K in it at the end. So you don't want to put S or anything like that because you've already used it. So gun near, and then they're stacked. If the H were to go away, this would be gun near, and then you use your P for split. So, and finally, if he's stacked to the weak side, you would just put gun far stack, and now you'd have twin open. So that's kind of the way that you would do the formations right there, and that gives you a 3-letter word that you can quickly identify, because that's the whole point of a breakdown, is you don't want it to be monotonous to the point where you are typing in so much information. This kind of gives you an opportunity to kind of limit. Now, you can create your own. If you like the stack opposite, you could put STO. You could put slant, you could put SL. Slant opposite, SLO. So you can modify your language and just find an abbreviation that works for you. But for me, this is what works for me. This is how I've done it. So now let's talk about the slot, because the slot kind of changes the game as well. If I have him here, this is no different to me than a tray formation. They've just backed him off the line. But you have to kind of draw a line in the sand of what is a slot and what is not a slot. How it has always been taught to me is if the H is directly behind the tackle and there's no part of his body outside, then you just go ahead and count it as a 20 personnel, and you don't label him as a slot. If he is outside or hipped or crotched on the tackle, you call it a slot. So here, even if I have the back, this is the strength call. So this would be trips slot, because it is a trips formation, but I have a slot. So trip slot in the backfield would be gun far. If he was here, it would be gun near slot. Now, I want to put open because in 12 personnel or 21 personnel, they will run trip slot without the open side. So I want to make sure that I always put open when I have an open. Now, where this really starts changing things is with the H is 2 here. Now, again, we're going to treat it just like 11 personnel in terms of strength, because this is no different than a tight end. He's just off the ball. So this would be gun near slot twin. because I have a slot and I have a twin, and I always start with the strength. So the strength is going to be the H, and then I have that. So gun near, slot twin. Now, what's the difference between gun far stack and gun near slot twin? Well, the H is outside the box. So again, having that demarcated in your kind of in your breakdown of, hey, if he's outside of the tackle, then we're going to do that. So this is, again, this would be gun near, slot twin, and this would be a 2x2 set. So that kind of gives you a basic breakdown of 20 personnel and kind of how to go about breaking it down from 11 personnel and then 10 personnel, the basic spread sets. I think the only one that kind of could give some problems to people is the 30 personnel with the way that teams are using gun split with a sniffer, or they're going pistol stack and things like that. So again, find ways to cut the fat, create abbreviations, and use your language. You don't necessarily have to wholesale change. I mean, I'm not saying that my way is the best, but at the end of the day, have a way to really efficiently put data into your breakdowns and be able to pull that out quickly and being able to kind of sort that. So this is just another way of naming formations. I've had several questions about how do I go about naming formations, or do I have a formation chart? This kind of gives you the basics of it, and then you can kind of go from there. Because at the end of the day, it's what you feel comfortable with because you're the one breaking it down. So thank you again for tuning into MQ Quick Hits. Make sure you visit the site. Make sure you follow me on @the_coach_A on Twitter. As always, my DM is always open, and then you can also contact me through the contact page. Thank you again. Have a great day.